How do students and educators perceive the ethical implications of AI use? This is a research proposal by me, Natalie Zapata. So, artificial intelligence in education is one of the most rapidly developing and contested areas in contemporary educational research. Its uses and applications range from learning systems to automated assessment and tutoring. The integration of these tools does raise questions about its efficacy and the consequences for its usage. Recent survey data indicates that while 44% of UK students express enthusiasm towards the use of AI, 78% also fear the possibility of missing out on future employment. This shows that adoption of AI in educational contexts generates a competing interest. This presentation will investigate AI in education across four areas: the research appropriate for investigating the topic and the justification, how the resulting data would be analyzed, how the data should be stored, shared, and processed, and the ethical, social, and legal and professional issues related to the topic. Hmm. The last topic will also be engaged at a deeper level, as the ethical concerns surrounding AI in education go beyond a problem to be solved, but are closer to a set of questions regarding what education is at a more fundamental level. This study also is focused specifically on higher education at a university level, as this is more consistent and relevant with the existing literature being used for this research paper. To do a hypothetical research study, a mixed methods approach would be most suitable as a form of design. The topic at hand has two distinct areas with different metrics. There is measurable, such as usage rates, assessment performance, engagement metrics in class, and compliance with data protection, and experiential, such as student perceptions of AI tools, educators and professional anxiety, and how institutions manage competing pressures. A purely quantitative approach would not be suitable and would not be able to capture the lived experiences of students and educators. This was demonstrated by Chen et al., who use a mixed methods approach like combining Likert scale questionnaire groups with group interviews of art teachers, or Pacina et al., who employed a structured survey incorporating various closed and open-ended questions. A case study approach would also be used by Zhao and Ding, who noted that most existing research on AI education use a purely empirical view, and case studies within specific contexts would allow for deeper understanding. For data collection, surveys could be conducted as a scalable form of student data, and structured interviews could be able to be arranged with educators based on the results of the survey. This method was explored by Alsbu and Alaune, which allowed them to use triangulation to verify findings across multiple sources. This is particularly important given how recent and fast changing the subject of this study is. There are some limitations to this. First of all, it is extremely resource intensive, and the quantity of qualitative data depends entirely on participants being willing to disclose its AI use openly. Students may fear consequence of retaliation over disclosing their AI use. Data generated through a mixed methods approach would require different analytical approaches. Quantitative data would require descriptive statistics such as the frequency of AI tool usage, demographic distributions, and assessment performance metrics. And from the quantitative analysis, we could perform hypothesis testing through inferential statistical methods such as averages between groups. Pacina et al. Provide a useful model applying correlation analysis and the students' t-tests using IBM's SPSS systems to test whether AI use correlates with positive attitudes towards the integration. Their findings revealed that students that use AI more frequently were more resistant to formal regulation. Qualitative data would, however, prefer a thematic analysis, with reviewing transcripts to find patterns among responses, such as professional anxieties and concern around academic integrity, among other things. Chen et al. Demonstrated a similar approach in their interviews with Chinese art educators by coding responses to help identify attitudes between different art colleges and universities. Qualitative and quantitative findings would need to be compared against each other to identify convergences and contradictions. Alsbo and Alaune used a similar approach across policy documents, interviews, and case studies. In the context of this proposed study, if a quantitative data suggested the high use of AI, but qualitative interviews revealed ethical discomforts, effective triangulation would allow this tension to become evident. Pacina et al. Found similar results systematically by categorizing responses, for instance. It is worth noting that the specific data types of this kind of topic generated are things like usage logs, performance trajectories, and engagement patterns generated by the AI platforms themselves. This also represents a significant data type identified by Ru and Li. Analyzing this data alongside self-reported surveys would add additional validity, though it would raise questions of consent and data handling and data collection. For the data storage, sharing, and processing, data handling in a subject such as AI requires a particular amount of care, as the data being handled may include personal, institutional, and potentially sensitive data. As such, it must comply with European Union GDPR guidelines and have an approach of security and transparency first. All data should be encrypted in institutionally approved repositories accessible only to the teams responsible for the research. GDPR compliance in a study like this was highlighted by Asbo and Laune, whose data demonstrated that variability in compliance across institutions in America compared in Europe. Data must also be anonymous, and no personal identifiable information such as names, registrations, and affiliations should be kept in record. Any PID should be replaced with codes or be encrypted. Data should be shared only with approved parties under formal agreements, and findings should be reported aggregated instead of an individual basis. Participants should know how their data is ideally being handled and how it's being used and shared. Pacina et al. Flags the risk of data leaks in AI-related educational research as the high volumes of personal data involved in creating AI systems can create opportunities for significant exposure to happen if this data isn't handled appropriately. Additionally, there are several ethical concerns regarding the use of AI in education. There's legal protections that are often not enforced equitably across different countries. In the UK in particular, the GDPR is the primary governing body that provides a regulatory framework if an independent AI system has to make an automatic recommendation or assessment of students, where there is a requirement for individuals to retain the possibility for a manual human review. Alspo and Alaune demonstrated this disparity of enforcement in developing nations that score with lower in data protection metrics, where this manual review wasn't also available. This isn't an act of negligence, but in fact a structural absence of regulatory infrastructure brought on by the country's lack of resources. The existence of a legal framework, therefore, does not guarantee legal protection and creates a class that the law protects but does not bind, and a class that the law binds but does not protect. Chen et al. Also identified that AI tools may bring up students with weaker foundational skills up to level. Founder of Khan Academy, Sal Khan, argues that AI actually does raise the floor of educational access, so the social impact of AI could be context dependent and not uniformly positive or negative. Additionally, algorithmic biases represent a significant concern. Asbo and Alaune provided evidence that AI systems display significant pre-existing biases on gender and socioeconomic status, perceived race, disability, prior to any mitigation or intervention. And while mitigation does reduce bias substantially, the issue persists that AI is already trained on historically unrepresentative data that will reproduce inaccuracies unless corrected. This is particularly dangerous in educational contexts where small events early on can drastically alter outcomes for students later. There's two professional issues at play as well. One being academic integrity, where the Brown University case study reported by Whitford shows a structural difficulty where if most of a class is suspected of cheating in an exam, institutional processes meant for an individual case becomes unusable. AI detection tools therefore can also produce false negatives and false positives, meaning that institutions cannot reliably identify AI-generated work. Chen et al. Adds to this, with humans being able only to distinguish human-generated text apart from AI, with only being accurate half the time. Brown's community raises a question as well on whether AI-improved work actually constitutes as the student's original words. Lastly, there is also a concern that students that use AI extensively may develop only surface-level skills with no depth or shallow understanding. This raises a question on what the true purpose of education is. If it is to acquire knowledge and capability, then AI assistance ultimately undercuts this whether detectable or not. It is worth noting that Pacina et al. Show a finding where students that find AI used to be acceptable actually use it less frequently than those with concerns, meaning that ethical frameworks and real-life behaviors are actually independent. To conclude, to investigate AI in education, I will need to be utilizing a mixed methods approach to be able to capture measurable outcomes as well as the lived experiences of students, educators, and institutions. The data generated must be handled with attention to consent, anonymity, and legal compliance. The ethical landscape encompasses questions of algorithmic fairness, accountability for institutions, professional integrity, and the purpose of education overall. And the literature collectively suggests that AI in education is a set of unresolved questions that researchers have a responsibility to engage with critically. These are my sources, my bibliography. Thank you very much and have a good day.